The most important decision you'll make today, you'll probably make badly. Not because it's hard, because of what time it is. You think your decisions are sorted by how much they matter. The big ones get your full attention, the small ones run on autopilot. But the machinery doing the deciding doesn't sort them that way. To the part of your brain that choosing a career and choosing a sandwich drawer from the same account. And that account has a balance. By the time the decision that actually matters arrives, you may have already spent everything on the ones that didn't. There's a name for what's left when the account runs dry. And once you see how it gets drained and who has been engineering the drain, you'll never trust a late afternoon yes the same way again. We were sold a simple promise. More is better. More options, more freedom. A better life, one choice at a time. Open your phone before you've had breakfast, and you'll make more decisions before 8 in the morning than your grandparents made before noon. 100 messages, 1,000 things to watch. An aisle of cereal longer than it needs to be. Every single one is a tiny freedom. Everyone is waiting for you to decide. That was the promise. This episode is about the bill. Marcus is 44. He builds things, kitchens, additions, the occasional whole house. 8 people work for him, and his day starts in a dark kitchen before any of them are awake. With the smallest decisions there are. What to wear to a day that's half job site, half client. What to eat. 14 messages he hasn't opened. None of it matters. All of it costs something. The meter is running before he's out of the door. Now hold that thought and look at a table of jam. In a now famous study, researchers set up a tasting booth in a grocery store. Sometimes they put out 24 jams, sometimes 6. The big display pulled a bigger crowd. Of course it did. More is more. But when it came time to actually buy, the people who saw 6 jams bought about 10 times as often as the people who saw 24. More choice drew them in, and then it froze them. There's a name for what just happened. The paradox of choice. Past a certain point, more options don't free you. They freeze you. Underneath it is something you can put a number on. The more options you put in front of someone, the longer every single choice takes. Each extra option is a small tax charged to the same account. Researchers call the result choice overload. You know it as standing in front of an open fridge, hungry, and closing it again with nothing. This is the part the promise left out. The options were supposed to serve the decision. Instead, the decision starts serving the options. And each one, the jam, the message, the shirt, quietly draws down a reserve you can't see and were never told you had. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why the most significant decisions of your life are being made on the worst possible budget.
Every decision you make today costs something. The question is, what are you spending it on?
So where does the account come from? For a long time, the answer started with a plate of cookies. In the original experiment, people were brought into a room that smelled of fresh baking. Some were allowed to eat the cookies. Others were told the cookies weren't for them. They could have radishes instead. Then, everyone was handed an impossible puzzle. The people who'd had to resist the cookies gave up on the puzzle far sooner. The conclusion was elegant. Resisting temptation and solving problems pull from the same tank, and the tank runs low. They called it ego depletion. That study launched an entire field. And that's exactly why it matters that the field later turned on it. When researchers tried to reproduce the effect at scale, around 2,000 people across 24 labs, the tidy version mostly didn't hold up. The idea that willpower drains like a battery is, at best, contested. So this episode is not going to tell you the science is settled. It's going to tell you something stranger. The mechanism is still being argued about, and the pattern keeps showing up anyway. In 2011, researchers studied a parole board, judges deciding, one after another, who gets to go home. Early in a session, they granted parole in roughly 2 of every 3 cases. As the morning wore on, that number slid down and down toward almost nothing right before their break. Then they ate, and the moment they came back, it jumped back to 2 and 3 and began sliding again. The single biggest visible factor in whether a person walked free wasn't the crime, or the lawyer, or the remorse. It was how long it had been since the judge last ate. 2 people, the same crime, the same judge. And your odds of walking free could swing on nothing more than whether your hearing fell before the judge's lunch or after it. It's one of the most famous findings in behavioral science, and it's worth holding loosely. Critics point out the cases weren't shuffled at random, so the order itself might explain part of the slide. Fine. So let's leave the courtroom and walk into a doctor's office. Across 23 practices and more than 21,000 visits, researchers tracked when doctors handed out antibiotics they probably shouldn't have. For infections, antibiotics can't even touch. The longer a doctor had been seeing patients that session, the more likely they were to write one. Not a panic at the end of the day, a slow, steady climb as the hours wore them down. To be fair, a large registered report in 2025 looked for decision fatigue in healthcare triage data and found no evidence for it. The argument is live. Here's why that doesn't save you. You can argue about any single study. Pick apart the courtroom or the clinic or the cookies. What you can't easily explain away is the shape that keeps appearing in all of them. Different people, different stakes, the same drift from morning to afternoon. The pattern doesn't stay in one building. It's the middle of the day. The questions haven't stopped coming. Which crew to the second site? Whether to eat the cost of a wrong delivery? Which of 2 subcontractors is telling the truth? This morning, Marcus would have talked each one through. Now the answers come quicker and shorter. Fine. Your call. Whatever's faster. Turns out to be, the practical reality is already visible. Your judgment is not a fixed thing you carry into every decision intact. It moves with how much deciding you've already done. The person who decides at 9 in the morning and the person who decides at 5 in the afternoon are not, in the way that counts, the same person. Every piece of advice you've ever received about making better decisions assumes the problem is your method. The problem is your balance.
By the end of the day, I don't decide things anymore. I just end them.
Now follow that one step further, because this is where it stops being an accident. If the drain is predictable, if a reserve empties on a curve you could draw on a graph, then it's something a person can plan around. And you don't need to win the argument about the mechanism to use it. You just need to know it's there. Somebody did. Think about the last time you booked a flight. You came to make one decision: this flight, at this price, clean, done. And then the funnel opens. Choose your seat, window, aisle, or a little extra legroom for a little extra money. Add a bag, add priority boarding, travel insurance, all ready ticked for you. a bigger seat just this once. By the time the real money is on the table, you've said yes to a dozen small things. You're not weighing the last one. You're clicking to make it stop. None of that ordering is random. The cheap decisions, the ones that cost them nothing, come first, on purpose. They soften you. The profitable ask comes last, on purpose, when you're spent. And it runs far past the airport. It's the rack of impulse buys at the checkout, at the end of the trip, when your cart and your patience are both full. It's the subscription that takes one click to start and a scavenger hunt to cancel. None of it is a bad design. It's the science you just heard, applied deliberately. Behavioral economists, pricing teams, designers whose entire job is the last screen. Whole departments are paid to answer a single question. When is a person most likely to stop resisting? You picture yourself at the bottom of that funnel, making a free choice. But the funnel was built to reach you at your lowest point when you're empty. The decision down there isn't really a decision. It's the behavior of a depleted brain. And this structure was designed from the top to find you in exactly that state. And it doesn't stay at the checkout. The same drift sits in the rooms where it costs the most. It's in the hiring manager who interviews the strongest candidate last at the end of a long day of forgettable ones and somehow doesn't see it. It's in the parent who held a hard line all afternoon and by bedtime says yes to anything just to make it quiet. It's in the couple who finally find time for the conversation that matters at 11 at night, the worst possible hour to decide anything that big. Same pattern, higher stakes. The decisions you most want your whole self for are the ones you keep showing up to with whatever's left. And here's the part they really don't want you to notice. So far, the drain has looked like something happening around you. This next part, you do to yourself every day, and you've been trained to call it a strength. Browser with more tabs than you can read the titles of. 6 apartments saved, none of them chosen. A dating app you keep installed, just in case. A cart you've been editing for 2 weeks. Every one of them is a door you're holding open on purpose. And you call that being careful. There are, roughly, 2 ways to handle a choice. Take the first option that's good enough and stop. Or hold every option open, hunting for the best one. We're taught the second way is the careful one, the thorough one, the smart one. A man named Herbert Simon gave the first way a name, Satisficing. And the research that came after found something uncomfortable. The people who keep every option open pay for it, in time, in regret, and in decisions that never end. Holding your options open isn't a free, neutral place to stand. It's a withdrawal, one you make every day, on every loop you leave running. It's the engine under what you've heard called analysis paralysis. Not weakness, just a tab that never closes. Which brings us back to Marcus. It's 10 to 6. He's been deciding since before sunrise. A client points at a wall and asks if they can take it out. Open up the kitchen, let in some light. It's a load-bearing wall. It is, by a wide margin, the most important decision in his entire day. And Marcus barely looks up. "Yeah," he says, "that's fine. We'll make it work." He didn't decide that. He let it go. To make the deciding stop. That's the cost. Not the option you didn't take. The reserve that every open door keeps draining while you call it being thorough. The freedom to choose and the capacity to choose well were never the same thing. And a world built to keep offering you the first has been quietly spending the second. Think back to those judges. They weren't crueler in the afternoon than they were in the morning. They weren't biased. They were empty. The mercy ran out before the cases did. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. Depletion doesn't announce itself. It never feels like running out. It feels like, that's fine. It feels like, we'll make it work. It feels exactly like a decision.
You are not indecisive. You are overdrawn.
The architecture isn't broken. It was built for a world with 12 options, not 12,000. So maybe stop asking why you're so indecisive. The better question is the one nobody's asking. Who spent the budget before you ever got here?